was set up with the idea of improving diversity, equity, and inclusion within our sport, but actually looking at ways to do that. So it was very, very important that we, as a board, as an executive team, actually listened to members of our community, members of the wheelchair basketball community, who have had experiences that we needed to be able to form our strategy. So the working group is made up of ex-players, coaches, part of the executive team, members of the board, who have, first and foremost, a real passion to develop or to advance our sport when it comes to an inclusive sport. And it's really, really important that when we frame our action plan around what our strategy is going to be for the next 18 months initially, that we're actually listening to the people who have those experiences within our sport. Our communities is going to be the bedrock of the foundation of what we're going to do. So it was really, really important to set that working group up. And it's a privilege to be the chair of that group, so that, you know, for me personally, it was about being part of the solution and actually helping to frame the strategy, and also as well challenging ourselves and making sure that we are held to account and actually that we are actioning all of the items that we discuss. I think from the first working group session, it was very clear that we had members of the group that had passion, and they were determined to make advancements when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion. And some of the experiences shared from that working group were interesting to hear, but also sad to hear in terms of what some of the barriers have been in the past. So from the one session, we have, of course, it's very, very important that we educate ourselves. We listen to each other, we listen to the stories. And then what do we do with that information? That's the next step. And that's the challenge that I have and the rest of the team have, is actually, it's all very well to have that information. What do we do with it? We need to see action in certain areas. And that working group is going to be pivotal to our strategy, as I said before, but also making sure that we have tangible actions, so that actually when we look back at the work we've done in a year or two or longer term, we can see the changes we've made in our sport and how our sport has grown, and how our sport is not, there are no barriers to participation in such a fast growing sport. I think the hope, I would love to be able to speak to some juniors in a few years' time that say, we at first, you know, we were potentially nervous about entering the sport, but actually all of the barriers, all of the initial feelings that they thought were stopping them from participating in the sport are no longer there. I'd like to also hear from those members who potentially did suffer from some of these barriers initially, and how the sport has improved and how it's more accessible, more inclusive in future years. And those are the people who will then, of course, share their stories, share their experiences, and say, actually, I can see that British wheelchair basketball is not only listening to its members and its community, but really, really intent on doing the right things and making sure that actually we have a long-lasting, sustainable sport that doesn't have barriers to entry. That, for me, would be a success. But of course, this isn't just a miniature project. This is a longer period, over many years. This is very much just the beginning in terms of our strategy. And as I've said before, very, very important we see actionable items, and our community can relate to what we're doing, and they have faith that we're actually listening and actioning along the way as well. Clubs do play a massive part. They play a massive part in this. And the clubs within the communities are the bedrock. So it is things like making sure that there are open days, for example, so that we showcase what the clubs are doing. A lot of some of the great work that our clubs are doing are not known by the wider community. So it's really, really important that we showcase that. It's really, really important as well that we extend we open our opportunities for coaching, for referees, for volunteers to a whole broad range of our community, so that actually the communities that want to participate within wheelchair basketball can see actually this is a sport that is open for all. And I think as well for the clubs, it's important that British wheelchair basketball shows the clubs that actually we're listening to them and we're also listening to their community. I think the clubs need to feel that actually they are being listened to, and that their part in the community is not just well, we're in that community and that's it. They actually play a part too. So I think that there is a relationship there between the two. Such a fast-growing sport like wheelchair basketball, we've got a real opportunity within this sport. You know, we've got disabled people alongside non-disabled people playing such a fast-growing sport. There's a real opportunity to really open the doors and showcase our sport and showcase that actually this sport really, really is open for all. So we have a responsibility there to make sure that we do things in the right way when it comes to how inclusive we can possibly be. I think also as well, wheelchair basketball, I'd like to see wheelchair basketball being the leader when it comes to some of the work that our diversity inclusion action plan is doing, and for other sports to be looking at what we're doing and saying, can we share some experiences? And of course, happy to do that. I think this is an initiative that, whilst we're doing that for wheelchair basketball, we can absolutely share our experiences across all sports. The whole idea is the impact, as you say, on the elite level comes from much lower down in the system. It's about the grassroots. It's about participation for juniors. Of course, the impact on people's mental health when they're playing a sport. You know, 78% of our members, I think at the last survey, said that wheelchair basketball had a positive aspect or impact on their mental health. The benefits of sport, you know, are there to be seen. And I think for wheelchair basketball, I think we're in a really, really good position to showcase that, to open the door and be the leading light when it comes to what we have done in the sport in making the sport more inclusive. Now, it still comes back to the action plan is only the start. The working group is only the start. It comes down to the action. What are we going to do? What strategies have we outlined, and how are we going to make tangible improvements to the sport? So it will start with, of course, education. Everything needs to be, we need to start with education, educating our executive team, our board, our coaches, our referees, our members, and not just a one-off 2-hour session on racism in sport, for example. This has to be an ongoing education program, making sure that people are aware of the steps that the sport is taking. We then also need to go through a period of listening to the community, which is what we're doing at the moment with British wheelchair basketball, and particularly the working group, is listening to those stories where we hear about the barriers to the sport. We hear about potential nervousness of becoming involved in wheelchair basketball. And then, of course, the third part is putting those things to action and making sure that part of our strategy is not to say, well, let's just create a plan to do something. We actually then see it through and we do it. And that's why I'm really, really excited with the work so far that we've done. But I know that there's a long way to go. would say to them, you're not alone in this. This is a wide problem, not just with wheelchair basketball, but with sport in general, and that's something that we need to address and tackle head on. So our commitment will be, we need to make sure that our clubs within our communities are listening to those specific issues that they're facing and addressing them. So I would like to feel that, in a couple of years' time, when we look back at the work we've done, that we see or we hear that those people who initially had those thoughts about nervousness of coming into the sport, those have minimized, and we actually see more people participating in the sport because those barriers are no longer barriers, or they've heard positive experiences from other members who have played and have said, actually, I've had a great experience playing wheelchair basketball, and these are the reasons why. But all of those initial thoughts are all valid. All I would say is that giving time, and now that we've actually got some a way forward when it comes to the strategy, I would like to see that we do see some change, tangible change, and that we share those experiences. Really, really important. You mentioned about role models previously, and that's very, very important. Our role models within the sport, our success stories, our GB athletes who have been very, very successful. We have a role as well to shine the light on their achievements, on their successes. And so our junior members can look up to, the aspirations of hopefully representing the country and hopefully winning medals. But it is not just about the elite level, of course, it's about participation for everybody. The impacts on mental health and physical well-being are there for all. So I think it's incumbent on us to make sure that not just at the elite level, but for absolutely everybody who's making a start and wanting to engage in a sport can look at wheelchair basketball and say, actually, that I can see that is a sport that has made some real strides to make it more accessible, more inclusive, and that's a sport that I would want to play. I'm also excited to see, some of the work that we're doing when it comes to how we can improve the opportunities from a coaching perspective, from a referee perspective. Anybody who wants to get involved in any aspect of our sport should be able to say, yeah, actually, that is an avenue that is open to me and something I want to explore. So I think some of the work that we're looking at with regards to coaches and referees and officials within the sport, I think is really, really exciting. And I think we've got put some aggressive timeframes and aggressive dates around that, but we have to be, we have to make sure that these are actionable. And if you think of the work already that Inspire a Generation is doing with regards to making, looking at new fun ways of making our sport more appealing, to, of course, increase participation. I think that is already, we're seeing the fruits of that already, and it's something that we can utilize as well when it comes to the ideas working group. So British wheelchair basketball is a fast-growing sport, fast-paced. We've got a real opportunity to reach so many people and enrich the lives of people who choose to participate in our sport. One of the reasons I wanted to become involved with wheelchair basketball was because it had that breadth of people that played the sport, both disabled and non-disabled people. And I think we have an opportunity and a responsibility as well to really make sure that our sport is as accessible and as inclusive as possible. And I think the diversity, equity and inclusion working group has a real responsibility to look at ways that we can do that. We have, that working group has a real, they're really close to our community, really close, they're part of the community, and they've been able to share experiences with us regarding some of the challenges that previously some of our members have had. And that will help us to form our strategy and also to put together a plan that makes sure that some of the things we're looking at are actionable and tangible, and we do see the benefits further down the line. I would like to look back at this in a couple of years' time and see that some of the juniors who've entered the sport have been impressed with actually potentially being nervous of joining our sport, of being part of our sport initially, but all of that nervousness have gone away because they feel welcomed, they feel part of our community. And they are then able to share those positive experiences with other members of the community who also potentially were nervous about coming into our sport as well. Ultimately, of course, a big part of what we're doing is looking for a truly representative GB team from the men's and women's perspective that are achieving and winning medals at major championships. But to get to that level, of course, we need to have the grassroots and the participation route open and accessible to absolutely everybody.